Welcome to the weekend. I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. Later on in the program, we're going to take a look at the interesting Denver mayoral race. You want to stay tuned for that. But first, a look at campaign finance reform, this fight that never ends, and some new twists and turns from Common Cause, one of those organizations I love to hate, but I kind of like you. Jenny Flanagan, thanks for being here.
Thanks.
And from freecolorado.com, blogger supreme, Ari Armstrong, thanks for being here.
Howdy, John.
All right, I tell you what, Ari, why don't you take the first slice. We know what campaign finance laws are. It says that we, the people, are restricted to how much money we can give, and there's certain disclosure laws. And we have these on all different levels, on federal, here and on state. What's changed?
So what particularly concerns me is if you want to speak out on any ballot measure in the state or at a local level. Even if you spend a trivial amount of money, you have to go through a bunch of bureaucratic red tape first in order to speak your mind. And this is what is concerning to me, because I regard this as a violation of free speech rights, and it actually chills people's ability to speak their minds on these issues that are important to them.
So in other words, even on a local issue that should we give more money to the fire department in Littleton, if you want to weigh in on that, you've got to do all the paperwork and fill it out. All right, but what happened recently that has made this more of an interesting case, and tell me how that's changed.
Okay, so what we're talking about here are issue committees, and there was a recent case about an issue in Parker North where some...
Just to specify, issue committees are the opposite of politicians.
Right, we're not talking about politicians.
We're not talking about giving...
and we're not talking about restrictions here, because with issue committees, you can give as much as you want. What we're talking about is disclosure.
And that's
in
by Colorado law. In Colorado law, if it's for referendum B, against referendum B, you can give as much as you want, but you've got to disclose.
Exactly.
And you give to an issue committee.
That's correct.
Got it.
Right.
Keep
so
going.
Issue committees, let's just step back. In Colorado, we're an initiative state, right? So when lawmakers are making decisions, we have lobbyists at the Capitol, and they're required to disclose, and so legislators know where that money's coming from. Well, with the initiative process, we Coloradans, we are the lawmakers, right? We're citizen lawmakers, and we have that same right and the need to know who's behind the campaigns who are trying to influence our vote. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about disclosure of the information from groups or individuals who are trying to influence us.
So I run initiatives, and I also campaign against initiatives, and when I put something on the ballot, I have to go to the Secretary of State and fill out a form and saying, for my issue committee, the issue committee says vote yes on last year was for healthcare choice. I have to say I got money from him and from him and from him. Every time I get a contribution of more than, what was it, 200, 250?
Once you meet the $200 threshold is when you have to start reporting, and then you disclose all of your donors, which seems like good bookkeeping from a donor's perspective.
It's a little harder than you think, in that when somebody throws down a $20 bill at a fundraiser, and who gave me this? I need to know who you were. I need to know your employment. I need to know where you work, your home address. I also need to know your blood type and what color eyes you have. Why so much information? For instance, the type of work you have is something that needs to be disclosed.
When you get into employer, when the donations get larger, the lower contributions, we just need their name. And again, that's important from the voter's perspective to understand who is behind the campaigns that are trying to influence their vote. It's very basic.
But on an issue committee, even if I give $5, does that have to be disclosed?
I think that the disclosure starts at $20.
Okay.
They have to disclose the amount, just not the fact that you gave the $5.
Oh, that's right.
It goes into the total pile.
Okay. So I got a whole bunch of $20 bills.
Here's the basic problem here, John.
Go ahead.
You are a seasoned expert at running initiatives. The regular citizen activist who might want to spend a few $100s to speak their minds on some ballot issue and maybe buy Facebook ads, such as me and my friend Diana Shea did last year on the personhood measure, we argued against it. These laws create enormous burdens to the citizen activists in speaking their minds. I brought a copy of the Secretary of State's manual. It's 100 pages of dense legalese that the citizen activist is supposed to be able to read through, comprehend before they can even file as a citizen group. Then they have to go through all the bureaucratic forms and filing every last cent of their donors. Then if they do something wrong, they can be fined $50 a day. Maybe your organization can absorb that, but a citizen activist cannot. Even if they get through all those hoops, then they can still be sued. In fact, so the court case recently that's prompting a Secretary of State rule change was just over somebody a group spent $800. This is not big money dominating politics. This is a group of citizen activists.
Talk about that group. This was down in Parker, and one lady decided to get involved, and she put more than $250 into this race.
Yeah, they spent about $800 on signs and such to oppose an annexation movement with their neighborhood into Parker. And then their opponent, instead of arguing it out in the court of public opinion, sued them to consume their time and energy. In fact, they had to raise more money than the initial $800 just to pay their legal bills. So they ended up spending about $2,200 total, and a court case that took several years. Well, if you're an average citizen activist, going through 100 dense pages of legalese, then having to go through all these intricate filing reports, then being at risk of being fined and sued, that is an unpassable barrier for many citizen activists.
I've been on that side of the equation as well, where my opponents, instead of fighting it out on the streets, hire slimy lawyers like Mark Ruskin. Yeah, I said that. And therefore go out there and tie up our time and our money and energy in suits that go nowhere, but we end up throwing out a lot of money. Doesn't that discourage people from getting involved? And I know what you're trying to do with campaign finance laws is to encourage people to get more involved.
That's right. We're not only trying to encourage people, but we want to make sure that people have confidence in the process. So when we hide the money and we don't know who's trying to influence our vote, it undermines the ability for people to effectively participate in their democracy. So that's why disclosure is important. And yeah, there are some hoops, but we have resources and there are capable staff at the Secretary of State's office who can help citizens walk through these process and make sure that they are taking the steps necessary.
Don't we, our side, don't we like disclosure? I mean, that's one of those things
no problem with
that we say.
look,
let me get this out. Where we say, you know, they're right on that. It's good to know that the school unions are the ones funding this measure for a bond increase, because now we know the guy who's working it is trying to get some money out of it. That seems pretty reasonable to me.
In many cases, disclosure, especially of very large contributions, is useful to the voter. However, I want to get to this fundamental point. The right of free speech entails the right to speak anonymously. For instance, on this personhood measure that we were fighting, we all know that some abortion doctors have been murdered by anti-abortion zealots. So people are reasonably concerned about reporting their names and addresses and their names and addresses of their employers in order to donate money to a paper fighting the personhood measure. There are reasonable concerns. Yes, voters might find it useful to see all the disclosures for every dollar, but that violates the individual right of free speech when we use government force to prevent people from speaking anonymously if they wish to do so. And if voters want to take that into account, if they want to say, look, you're not disclosing, so we don't trust you and we're not going to vote for this, then that is their option. But it should not.
Hang on. Let me bring it over. Tell me, is there some role for anonymous free speech, kind of like the pamphleteers of old who would post things? Isn't there something to be said that when I speak anonymously, therefore my employer doesn't know what I'm saying about politics and other people can't hold something over me? Is that a concern to you that should be protected?
I think there might be a role for anonymous speech in some cases, but the reality is the Colorado Constitution requires disclosure. That's what we have on the books.
The reality is we have a First Amendment.
That's the reality. That issue has not been challenged, and that's not part of the conversation right now. The reality is, in 2008, over $70 million was spent from small contributions and small issue committees to the very largest. And as we go into 2012 election with more issues going to be on the ballot, now's not the time to limit disclosure and limit the information for voters, but to improve it and make it so it works for all of our
Here's
citizens.
the compromise between two very well-reasoned ideologies. Well, then let's see if we can get some common ground that says, all right, if somebody wants to put in a little bit of money, that they can do anonymously. And if somebody wants to put in a lot of money and really fund something, put it on the ballot, yeah, we want to know about it. But somebody who's spending just a few $100s, is that worth doing? Is that why we have the $250 threshold before you have to start reporting? Isn't that 200? Isn't that the idea behind it?
Well, the idea is if you're going to form a committee and you're going to start influencing someone's vote, you have to start somewhere. So we want to start capturing it.
What if you don't form a committee?
Well, if you raise it to $5,000, what does that really get you? I mean, you still have to track those donations that are coming in because you have to know when you reach that $5,000 threshold. And again, from the donor's perspective, I want to know if I'm giving my money to someone to be my advocate, I want to know that they're using those funds appropriately, that they're doing the thing that they said they do.
Between you and the group.
It's good bookkeeping.
What if
It's
I
common
want?
sense.
What if I want to spend $1,000 of my own money and put out an ad or buy a bunch of signs and stick them in people's yards? Do I then need to disclose if I'm the only person doing it?
Yes, I think under the law, if you are raising and spending money to influence the vote, then you have to disclose that you can give that money as in-kind to another issue committee that's already formed,
Now,
or you give it yourself.
The treasurer now has set rules saying it's not going to be 200, it's going to be
Secretary of State.
Secretary of State, excuse me.
And it's still under advisement, so he's thinking about raising the trigger level to $5,000.
Good idea?
I think it's a great first step toward mitigating some of these chilling effects on free speech. Yes, I do.
And bad idea?
It's a bad idea. He doesn't have the right to do it. The Constitution says we need full and timely disclosure. That's what we've got to have.
Well, let's back up and explain why he wants to make the rule change. According to the 10th Circuit case decided last fall, that case in Parker, the spending $800, the court said that amount is well below what we would regard as the line to trigger issue group reporting. So the Secretary of State's office is, I think, legally required to substantially raise that amount. And so $5,000, sure, they're just at some point you have to just draw a line in the sand. But I think $5,000 is a reasonable direction to go toward capturing this.
Is the $200 threshold adjusted for inflation?
I don't think so.
So over time, when inflation hits and that becomes worth $20, then if I want to,
It probably is. Most of the thresholds in Article 28 of the Constitution are changing. I don't know the answer.
All right. So basically, I'm sensing two different arguments here. One, a very ideological argument, saying if I want to spend $800 to fight the annexation of my backyard, I shouldn't have to form a lawsuit or form a committee. But the other side saying, wait, we want to know where the money's coming from. I'm worried about the legal harassment that happens after. As a guy who has paid hundreds of thousands of dollars from direct legal harassment, how do you address that? Because let me tell you, you can't tell me it doesn't happen. I've been the victim of it.
It happens. I've been the victim of it too. I mean, we have an imperfect political process. I can't solve that problem for you right now. But what I can say is that voters have the right to know. And as imperfect as our process is, we have to have an informed citizenry if we're going to have good decisions come out. And in Colorado, the citizens are the decision makers oftentimes at the ballot box.
The last bit of legal harassment I had was against me personally, not the issue committee, meaning which my home and my little bit of savings was up at risk just because I wanted people to be able to vote on an issue.
And listen, she's saying voters have a right to know. What about people's right to speak their minds without fear of being sued by attack attorneys? That is obviously violating and chilling people's free speech rights. In fact, I myself have refrained from taking action, speaking my mind on certain ballot measures because I did not want to deal with the bureaucracy and the threat of lawsuits. Diana Shea, my friend that we worked with last year, she testified that she restricted the amount of money she raised, restricted her ability to speak out because of these onerous reporting burdens.
All right, so the next step is we wait to see what the Secretary of State does. You want him to keep it the way it is, you want it bumped up, and you want it gone, you want it the way it is, and hopefully a little better enforced.
That's right.
And there you have it. Get more information at independenceinstitute.org. We'll be right back.